2022's Trails from Zero was the first game in the series I truly fell in love with. I think it was thanks to the strong cast of characters, relatively small scope, and strong storytelling. The second game in the cross-bell duology, Trails to Azure, is the perfect complement to that game. While really slow to start, it ultimately pays off as the best entry in the storied Trails saga. Now, as I just mentioned in the intro, the game is really slow to start. After the prologue starts off and it's literally just picking up right where the last game left off, chasing the remaining leaders of the cult. However, once you finish that and get to chapter 1, it really slows to a crawl. The game has to reintroduce you to all the different characters in this world. You also get new characters added to the SSS, Noel and Wazi. And throughout chapter 1, you're doing all these side quests that don't really contribute to the main plot in any meaningful way. In fact, I almost quit playing as I waited for the story to pick up. I was like, hello, is this ever going to get better? And I feel like the game could have shaved about 5 to 10 hours from that opening chapter and the game would have been much better for it. But once you get through all that, then the game really kicks off an international trade convention in Crossbell. Leaders from all the neighboring nations come in to discuss trade, and this is really where the game gets going. Now, I don't want to talk more about it because I can't really talk about it without spoiling the plot, so I'll just kind of leave it there. For those that have played the Cold Steel games, you probably already know what happens, but again, I'm just going to leave it at that. In broad strokes, the game is very political, and as members of the SSS, you're trying to navigate your way through the situation just doing what you can. That all said, I felt like Trails to Azure was much edgier. Zero felt like a lighthearted anime, nothing too crazy happened, but here in Azure it felt much more violent and in some ways much more sexual. There's a lot of times where nameless characters are just butchered and there's blood everywhere, and then of course you have characters like Randy throwing out some very suggestive jokes, not to mention a beach day intermission that I'll let you imagine and experience for yourself. And what's nice about all this is that it never goes over the line being too much or too cringy. In fact, I think the game needed to step up its tone from the last one so it just wasn't another game in the series. Trails to Azure reuses a lot of assets, and so I feel like it needed something to kind of differentiate it and elevate it above the previous game, and I feel like it did that with the story here. And overall, I just found this story really enjoyable. I loved getting reintroduced to all these characters, having a familiar world to have them set in, and seeing how they grow through this new adventure. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but it kind of makes me want to play the rest of the Cold Steel games to see where these character stories go from here, especially with Trails into Reverie coming out later this year, which is a follow-up to the previous 9 Trails games. To say the least, I have a lot of catching up to do. Now, I wasn't sure where to talk about this, so I'll kind of just throw it in here. The Trails series has a lot of jargon that it throws into its games, and while I didn't really mind it in previous games, for some reason it really got on my nerves here. Like, for example, what the heck is ARG? How tall is that? How long is it? Like, why make up a fake measurement? I have no frame of reference for what this is. Like, just use real measurements, use meters. I don't care. I know us in America are way behind the rest of the world, but at least with meters, we have a frame of reference for how big stuff is. So to me, making stuff up like that is just so weird. And also, every character has a nickname. And to me, I feel like nicknames like that should be special or one-off, like a few characters, but when everybody has one, it becomes less meaningful. The Divine Blade of Wind, Bloody Shirley, I mean, even the freaking lawyer has a nickname. I don't know, I just don't understand it. But other than that, the story was pretty good. In a lot of ways, the gameplay for Trails to Azure is identical to Trails from Zero, so if you've played that game, you'll be very familiar with this gameplay here. The general loop plays out something like this. There's like a main story quest, and you'll have other optional quests that you get from the terminal, go out, complete them all, finish them, go on to the next one, and rinse and repeat. Now, on occasion, the story quests can be a little bit longer as it builds the story, which makes a lot of sense. For example, the trade conference chapter is much longer, which makes sense because that's a key part of the story. There's also intermission chapters with no combat at all that I really enjoyed quite a bit. They're super fun and cool, and I really don't want to spoil them at all because it was such a joy to play through them, so I'll just let you experience them for yourself. Now, there are a few minor twists to the gameplay overall. Now, in the combat, like I said, Noel and Wazi are SSS members, so they can be in your party at any given time. You'll also get more S-Craft combo abilities the more you complete side quests, so definitely make sure you go do those so everybody can kind of combo off each other. And something new here is a burst meter. Essentially, when it's filled, you can automatically have your team take a turn, and you can also cast spells for free until the meter empties. I feel like this adds a really interesting wrinkle to combat. It kind of gives you new life, and especially because I feel like the combat here was much harder. For example, I felt like I was constantly getting stopped in battle with random status effects. There was one fight in particular where I can remember the enemies either freezing me or delaying me, and I just got stunned into oblivion, and I had to retry it like 3 or 4 times just because it was getting so annoying. So it seems like this time around, accessories are much more important than ever, so make sure you have those equipped. Now, among some of the smaller additions is a car. With this, you can fast travel around to the surrounding areas without having to run to a bus stop and then go there. It doesn't make a seismic difference to the game overall, but this small quality of life addition is appreciated. There's also a new minigame called Pom Pom Party. It's kind of like Match 3 meets Tetris. You kind of match up 3 colors and it drops down bricks and then it sends them to your opponent and vice versa. It's not super deep, but it does play into the actual main story at times, so it's kind of fun and you can play it on your own if you want to. While Trails to Azure doesn't reinvent the wheel with its gameplay, I didn't really mind that. To me, this game is much more about the story, as the gameplay was already pretty solid. So if you're expecting big, sweeping changes, then you might be disappointed, but if you're here just looking for more of the same, then you should be pretty satisfied. From a presentation standpoint, I don't really have much to say, as much like the gameplay, virtually nothing has changed. Most of the game still takes place in Crossbell and the surrounding areas, with some new areas and dungeons. The main one being Orcus Tower, a new section of town that essentially serves as City Hall, as well as the site for the trade discussions. As far as how the game runs, I played it on Nintendo Switch and it ran pretty great and looked pretty great. I did end up playing most of the game in turbo mode, which I will slow down here since a lot of people complained about seeing the fast forward function in my previous review, as I know that can be kind of hard to watch. One thing I will say is that I feel like the music is better here. A lot of it is just different arrangements to familiar melodies or tunes, or just straight up using the exact same songs. However, there were enough differentiating ones that to me it made the music feel much better, and I don't know, I just liked it more. Trails to Azure takes way too long to really get going in earnest, but when it does, it's fantastic. It has really compelling story elements and great character moments. It doesn't reinvent the wheel gameplay-wise, and there's not a ton of new areas, but if you just want more story with this cast of characters, then this is an absolute must-play. Now, if you want to hear my thoughts on the last game, Trails from Zero, be sure to check out this video right here. And special thanks to Reset Switch, Tyler Kuzawa, and the Miyazaki Man for supporting me over on Patreon. To get exclusive videos and other cool perks, consider supporting me over on patreon.com/thegaming shelf. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.